Right now, Cedar Fair is finalizing a merger to become the world's largest amusement chain with Six Flags, but we still should talk about Cedar Fair as a whole, mainly to reflect on some of their choices over the past couple of years. Some aspects of this company always confuse me, and I think it's time to put these into the light. This is also not focused on any particular parks, but rather looks at the company and its practices as a whole. Some parks such as Kings Dominion and Island are killing it with additions and overall guest experience, while others are lacking, which is not their fault either necessarily. While many examples will be focused around Top Thrill 2, they are not targeted at Cedar Point and more on the company's executives. Cedar Fair is notorious for neglecting its smaller and less trafficked parks, giving them little to no upgrades every few years. Michigan's Adventure is a prime example of this, as they haven't received a major investment since Thunderhawk, a Vekoma SLC. Dorney Park also finally got Iron Minutes this year, ending a 12-year drought for a new coaster. A huge question is, are the parks themselves to blame in this situation? And the answer is no, as places such as Dorney are super dedicated to upgrading their park and bringing more guests in. Six Flags, who is merging with Cedar Fair, always try to get a ride to every park every year, and while those days are over, they still aren't neglecting smaller parks and are trying to do everything in their power to boost their attractiveness. Look at Bobcat, now open at Great Escape, which is a super enticing ride for people of all ages. This also applies to manufacturers that Cedar Fair works with, as they have completely crossed out multiple options for new rides. Intamin is the popular example here for good reasoning, but they've also done this with many other manufacturers. They also completely avoid some companies like Premier Rides. I think everyone was hopeful for Top Thrill 2 and still are, but we can't deny that the move to choose Zamperla wasn't the best. While they are by no means bad, this is their first lightning coaster and it's over 400 feet tall. Cedar Fair had multiple options for this project, and they went the cheaper route, which came back to bite them. Even if they didn't choose Intamin, they should have played a factor at least in the making of Top Thrill 2, as they knew the problems from the original and could work with CP and Zamperla to fix them. The problem at hand is not stemming from Dragster, rather the trains from Zamperla, but if they had worked with Intamin for dimensions and design on the trains, it could have worked out better than it did. The moral of the story here is that Cedar Fair is cheap in some circumstances, but what doesn't make sense is that they know that large B&Ms are huge crowd pleasers and are reliable, yet they are slowly starting to shy away from those as well. Fortunately, they have stuck with making some, but they also cheap out on multiple rides, leading to severing ties with manufacturers. Steel Vengeance is a prime example of this, as RMC supposedly suggested a truss lift hill, but because of cost, Cedar Fair declined, which led to structural issues from the stress put on the old Mean Streak supports. One of the main reasons I wanted to make this video was because that they genuinely confused me, as they are willing to put $30 million attractions in some of their popular parks, but end up cheaping out at others. This isn't solely based on popularity either, because Cedar Point has received 2 relatively cheap attractions in the past 2 years, compared to a park like Kings Island, which has less attendance but receives more expensive and reliable rides. More on the topic of manufacturers, Cedar Fair has no hesitation to blame the companies for making big mistakes. In a recent statement by Cedar Point, they state Zamperla a lot when talking about the problems of Top Thrill 2. Contrast this to Thorpe Park, which is completely taking the blame for the issues with Hyperia, instead of directing it to the manufacturer, Mock Rides. Cedar Fair also has no hesitation to hide the details or problems from the public. The problems of Top Thrill 2 haven't been fully confirmed by CP, and they are trying to hide as much as possible from us. On the other hand, Kings Island was telling their employees to remain dead silent about the incident on Banshee, which was only a move to keep the park's reputation high. Although the news outlets got a hold of the information, Cedar Fair has also made a multitude of questionable decisions that upset lots of people. Let's go through them real quick. They removed Halloween Haunt at multiple parks in favor of a family-friendly event that brought in no guests, promising immersive dark rides to major parks but ending up never doing it, creating Dinosaurs Alive and removing them only a few years after their opening, relocating a Vekoma inverted boomerang to Dorney only to scrap it a few years later, buying Geauga Lake, closing it soon after, and relocating most of the rides to other parks, closing arguably one of the most iconic Cedar Fair rides at Kings Island and keeping it a mound of dirt for 5+ years, Zamperla, Wild Mouse to Cedar Point, Intimidator and I-305 retheme, keeping a majority of the parks closed for seasonal events, selling the land that California's Great America sits on. Okay, we're done with the rant. While I've talked bad about Cedar Fair, I think that there are many things that they've also done really well. Their new areas and plazas are incorporating more theming than ever, and they have also great events, which I can't say the same about Six Flags. Another reason I created this video was that I believe Six Flags gets more hate than necessary, and a lot of the problems present at their parks also happen in Cedar Fair ones. Speaking of Cedar Point, watch this video about the world's largest lawn ornament.